Good morning, everyone. Joined this morning by my long-serving colleague and friend, the Deputy Premier, Jeremy Rockcliffe. This morning, I called on the Governor and requested that an election be held for the House of Assembly on the 1st of May. I did this because Tasmania can't afford the uncertainty of minority government. Now more than ever, we need a strong, stable majority government. So that's why this election will be about who can deliver the strong, stable majority government needed to secure Tasmania's future. While COVID is not over yet, and many Tasmanians are still getting back on their feet, our economy is growing again. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, and job numbers are back at pre-pandemic levels. Tasmanians have shown great courage, resilience, compassion and kindness over the past year. We are in a good place, but there is a long road ahead and Tasmania needs certainty. Our plan to secure Tasmania's future will deliver the certainty that Tasmania needs by making the decisions needed to continue keeping Tasmanians safe and secure from COVID-19, delivering a more diverse and resilient Tasmanian economy to create jobs and to help protect against future challenges, securing the essential services that all Tasmanians rely on, and ensuring that young Tasmanians and regional Tasmanians can get the training, apprenticeships and jobs for their future right here in Tasmania. My team and I have been decisive and we've held firm during the COVID-19 crisis, and together with Tasmanians, we've helped Tasmania become one of the safest places in the world. On the other hand, Labor are indecisive, have no plan, and we all know that they will do a deal with the anti-everything Greens if there is a hung parliament, just like they did last time. Before I take questions, I just want to mention one other matter which has been raised in the Parliament in the last week. This is the issue of donation disclosures. I want to assure Tasmanians that a re-elected majority Gutwein Liberal government will legislate the changes that we have publicly announced. But because that obviously can't happen in time for this election, the Liberal Party has agreed to voluntarily disclose within 2 business days all donations received for the state campaign exceeding $5,000. The State Director will put a statement out later today with more detail on how this will work, and I would hope that other parties will likewise voluntarily disclose thresholds and amounts themselves. In conclusion, every election is a choice, and this one is no different. This election is a choice between a majority Gutwein Liberal government with a clear plan to secure Tasmania's future, or a hung parliament and another dysfunctional Labor Green minority government. The only way to deliver the certainty Tasmania needs is by re-electing a majority Gutwein Liberal government. So my message is, and will be for the next 5 weeks, if you want the strong, stable majority government needed to secure Tasmania's future, on the 1st of May, vote Liberal.
Premier, you effectively send your own government into minority through your conversation with Sue Hickey on Sunday. She's guaranteed supply and confidence regardless. You're yet to deal in legislation with electoral donation reform or pokies reform, as your government promised ahead of the next election. And as you know, the opposition leader is actually due to deliver a baby in June. Why should we believe that holding the election a year before it's legally due is anything but political self-interest?
Look, one of the things that I know, and from being Treasurer for 7 years, is that confidence is very important. Under a minority Labor Green government, confidence collapsed and we went into recession and Tasmanians lost jobs. The one thing that we need as we come out of COVID, as we rebuild out of COVID, is the certainty that a majority government can provide. We need to secure Tasmania's future, and that's exactly what I intend to do. Now, in terms of the opposition leader, I have given a great deal of thought to that matter. For obvious reasons, an election, if the Parliament were to descend into dysfunction in June or July or August, would not be appropriate, and it's something that I certainly would not do. I think it's important that we go now and provide the certainty at the beginning of May.
But you spoke with the Speaker on Sunday. She has been taking pot shots at your colleagues for 3 years. You've decided you've had enough. Out of the blue on Sunday, finally had that conversation with her. Why are we supposed to believe this is not about political self-interest?
Look, the Speaker brought that on herself. The Speaker was quoted in the press on Sunday seeking certainty. I've been upfront with Tasmanians from day one since I became Premier. I've been frank and I've been open, and I could see no reason to not treat the Speaker with that same frankness and openness. And so I went to see her and I explained the circumstance. It's the Speaker that decided to quit the Liberal Party and to put the government into minority. And as I've said, minority government will lead to a loss of confidence, it will lead to a loss of jobs, and it will impact our economy. And that's something that we simply can't have. My aim is to secure Tasmania's future. We have a plan, a strong plan, and I want to continue to roll that out for the benefit of Tasmanians.
The Parliament functioned effectively this week. It happened as it was supposed to, and you were a minority that entire time. Why are Tasmanians supposed to accept that you cannot govern in minority?
Look, minority government, it's been proven, leads to dysfunction and leads to a lack of confidence. As I've said, the one thing that we can't have at the moment as we rebuild out of COVID is a lack of confidence impacting on our economy and impacting on our rebuild. And that's where minority government will take us. The simple fact of the matter is, Tasmanians have been fantastic to work with over the last 12 months. We have together delivered one of the safest places in Australia, one of the safest places on the planet. We have a clear plan, and that clear plan is working, and I want to ensure that it continues to work and that we can deliver for Tasmanians the security that they need. And that's why we're going to an election. I want to secure Tasmania's future.
You said over and over again.
Council election on the same day,
Yes, we will be.
and that will obviously give your candidates a huge leg up.
Look, that'll be a matter for the Electoral Commissioner to manage. We've taken advice from the Solicitor General, and I've been informed that it will be manageable.
You said over and over again that your government would go to full term, that you would serve full term. Labor probably hasn't even had time to pre-select candidates in other seats. The Greens are still formulating some other policies that they are expecting to release around the time of the next budget. Is this just a trick?
This is a decision made to secure Tasmania's future. Minority government is where the government stands right now. That will lead to dysfunction, it will lead to a lack of confidence. We have come too far in terms of the work that has gone on to ensure that Tasmania is safe, one of the safest places on the planet. Our clear plan is working as we rebuild Tasmania, and I want to continue with that clear plan.
Premier, there's no guarantee you'll win majority government. I mean, you're doing well in the polls, but it's always tight in these elections, as you know. Will you refuse to govern in a minority or in a coalition of any sort if that arises?
Look, I won't govern in minority. Give that very clear commitment.
Or in a coalition?
I will give a very clear commitment that I will govern in majority or not at all. Under the previous Premier, Will Hodgman, we saw what minority government prior to him becoming Premier could do. We had a recession, 10,000 jobs in Tasmania were lost at the peak. Mr Hodgman then formed a majority government, and since then, over the last 7 years, 26,000 jobs have been created. We've had one of the fastest growing economies in the country. Tasmania has been confident. That's the Tasmania that I want to see.
Given that the Speaker has been acting effectively as an independent for a long time now, and there's been no sign of dysfunction this week, you're talking about the risk of dysfunction. Can you give us any evidence that that is a genuine risk that required you to go now, other than, I think that a lot of people might think that this is a fairly cynical ploy. Can you explain why that's not the case and what the risk of dysfunction really is?
Look, when the Speaker was a member of the Liberal Party, she voted against the government on a number of occasions. The Speaker is now an independent. I certainly don't expect that behaviour would get any better under the circumstances that we find ourselves in. We are in minority government. That's a statement of fact. And I wanted to deliver a majority government for Tasmania. It's as simple as that. I want to ensure that we can secure Tasmania's future, and we've got a clear plan to do so.
There's a large focus, Premier, nationally at the moment on the rights of women and treating women with respect. How is forcing a heavily pregnant woman to go to the rigours of a long election campaign, how is that respecting the rights of women?
Look, as I've said, and that's looking in terms of Ms White, they're questions that you should put to her. I have given this a great deal of thought, and obviously an election later this year is completely out of the question. But I believe...
Why? Why is the election later?
Well, in June, late June, Ms White will be giving birth, I understand it, and through July we'll have a newborn child.
But next March, she'll have a
in
month
There's
off.
August, September, October,
right
November,
now we are in a minority government situation. As I said, I've considered this. The election will be held by the 1st of March, or on the 1st of March, and this matter will be over one way or the other.
Other than saying you're in minority government, can you explain anything that's changed since a week ago in terms of the function of the Parliament and the state?
A week ago, Sue Hickey was a member of the Liberal Party. Today she's not.
And what's
You
that
have-
changed?
Again, what that's changed is that as a member of the Liberal Party, we could not rely on Ms Hickey to vote with us on all matters. She's now an independent and completely free. I don't expect that circumstance to get any better.
Since you spoke to Sue Hickey, have you spoken with Madeline Ogilvie about her joining the Liberal government?
I've had a number of positive discussions with Madeline Ogilvie.
Will she be a Liberal candidate?
It's a matter for the party and, importantly, it'd be a matter for Madeline Ogilvie.
Do you think
And
she'll
so how
make a
does
good candidate?
pre-selection work now, Premier? You haven't actually pre-selected your candidates. Usually you have to advertise in the newspaper, people talk to the state executive. Do you get the captain's call now?
In terms of the party processes, they will take place over coming days.
What are the processes, please?
Those party processes will take place over coming days, and I'll have more to say about our candidates in a few days' time.
What are the
Importantly,
party
importantly, if I
processes,
could make this point, in terms of my sitting members, they have all assured me that they will be standing and running, and that is a strong team, and we will add candidates to that over coming days, and I'll have more to say on that
What's
What are
matter.
the
What's the
processes?
process?
Again, look, that's a matter for...
The normal
That's,
processes
that
are
is...
you advertise for candidates,
that-
people present to state
Look,
executive.
that is a matter for the Liberal Party to explain, but state executive will play a role.
You're
Are you
the
doing
leader
this
of
to
the
take
Liberal Party,
advantage
Premier.
of the good fortunes that we had during the pandemic? And are you now doing this because you're worried that the economic situation is going to deteriorate later in the year?
Look, we have followed a pathway built around a clear plan, and that plan was to keep Tasmanians safe, and as I've said, we are one of the safest places in the country, if not one of the safest places on the planet as a result of that. That clear plan also was about rebuilding our economy, and we've taken significant steps, introduced a construction blitz middle of last year, brought down a budget which had significant spending for health, education and especially infrastructure. Our economy has bounced back. Tasmanians are confident. We are seeing jobs being created. In fact, we are seeing vacancies that we need to fill. It is important that we can continue with that clear plan to ensure that we can secure Tasmania's future. That is why I have called an election.
You're talking steady as she goes, Premier. Why should Tasmanians vote for you? Let's get to the nitty-gritty. What are you seeking a mandate on exactly? TAFE, for example?
Look, in terms of our policies, we will make those clear over the coming period. But in terms of TAFE, obviously, in accepting the PESRAC recommendations, we want to see TAFE become a more nimble, more flexible organisation, better able to operate like the businesses it's there to serve. But I'll be clear on that. We're not going to privatise TAFE. What we're going to do is continue with its evolution and actually ensure that we have a fit-for-purpose training provider. That's certainly one of our policies. In terms of the extensive work that was done under PESRAC, we'll be rolling out policies over the course of the election period, and Tasmanians will be able to make up their mind on those policies in coming days.
We've had a commission of inquiry starting soon into the most horrific abuses against children in Tasmania. It seems, frankly, convenient that we'll be running an election at the same time. Are you trying to take the heat off the government in that space? Is that a convenient timing thing as part of this?
Look, the Commission of Inquiry will go on for some time. And in fact, this week, both houses passed the necessary amendments to ensure that the changes that were recommended by the President could be implemented in that Commission. That will go on for some time. I am the Premier that has called on that Commission of Inquiry. No Premier before me has taken that step. Back to 2023, I first was involved in the discussion in the Parliament in 2003. As Premier, I want to see that Commission of Inquiry do its work. Importantly, do it once, do it right, and ensure that we end up with the safest framework for children in the
Premier,
state.
You've plunged us into $1 billion debt and deficit. Is this a sign, this calling of an early election, a sign that you're just too scared to go to another budget because it's a horror show?
Look, I've been upfront with Tasmanians in terms of our financial position. In fact, I was the first Premier and Treasurer in the country to release an economic statement. In fact, I released two last year. I've called it as it is. You know, these are challenging circumstances, but importantly, what we saw in the mid-year financial report was, as a result of the stronger growth in our economy, revenue starting to grow, we saw downward pressure on the deficits, and importantly, I would expect, if we can continue to see the confidence in our economy that we're seeing now, if we can continue to see the investment and the growth and the jobs being created, that we will see increased revenue streams and we'll see an improved budget position.
Premier, are you
talked
happy
about-
that the Prime Minister campaigns alongside you for part of this election?
Look, I've got a very good relationship with Scott Morrison. I've worked very closely with him now over the last period since I've been Premier, and obviously I'd welcome him here campaigning with me.
And which
Talk about-
seats will you be focusing on?
I want to win as many seats as we possibly can.
You've talked about the need for certainty, Premier. Is there anything on your legislative agenda that you've not been able to get through this Parliament that you will take to this election to make the case it should get through? And what is the fate now of the pokies legislation that's been long promised and such a big focus at the last election?
Well, in terms of our position on the gaming legislation and the gaming matter, that legislation will be introduced as soon as it can be after the government is formed, after this election. Now, again, our position on that hasn't changed, and we've been quite clear with people. Our policy position won't change. In terms of other legislation, obviously the workplace protesters, we believe that that's important legislation that was defeated in the upper house. As much as, you know, Labor would try to convince people that they have an interest in that legislation, they let Tasmanians down. They let regional Tasmania down, especially in terms of voting against that in the upper house this week. And obviously we would like to have a mandate for that.
Have you called the election
Voluntary
now
assisted
because the
dying.
federal
Voluntary
government's
assisted dying.
popularity is deteriorating, and it will be potentially damaging for the state government to wait until after a federal election? Has that entered into your thinking at all?
I have called the election because we want to secure Tasmania's future. And at the moment, Tasmania has dealt with the pandemic as well as any other jurisdiction on this planet. We are rebuilding our economy. We are creating jobs. It is important that we don't lose that momentum and that we continue to secure the future for Tasmania. That's why I've called this election.
Voluntary assisted dying is yet to receive royal assent. What happens with that legislation now? Will that still be coming into effect now that
Yes, it will.
Parliament's broke?
My advice is that that is exactly the case, that it will come into effect.
With the voluntary disclosure of political donations, does that extend to the Legislative Council as well?
In terms of the Legislative Council, as you'd be aware, they already have a spending cap, and I think that
They have no donations disclosure.
but they have a spending cap. And in terms of the Legislative Council, I'm not going to interfere in that process. In terms of the lower house, any donations that are received that are above $5,000 will be disclosed within 2 days.
How is it appropriate to have donations disclosure for a House of Assembly campaign but not for a Legislative Council campaign? Surely the question of integrity of elections is the same no matter what the House of Parliament is.
Look, in terms of the Legislative Council, they already have a cap in place, but that's a matter for the party secretary, and he'll be saying more this afternoon.
But the
And just
reason-
to check, sorry, will the Tasmanian Liberal Party be disclosing donations or individual MPs, just to clarify?
Oh, look, individual MPs won't receive individual donations. Donations are received by the party, and therefore all donations will be disclosed.
So the upper house candidates will be included?
Oh, well, I would presume so. They won't be receiving donations themselves. It'll be captured by the party. But again, in terms of the upper house circumstance, they obviously have a cap in place, and we're not going to change that.
Holding an election during the pandemic does seem like a bit of a risk. Have you sought public health advice?
Look, in terms of this, obviously we were able to hold an upper house election for the seat of Rosevears earlier, and obviously that was moved on one occasion and extended, but that was managed at a much more difficult part of the cycle than what we're at the moment.
And what happens if there is a case of coronavirus, sorry, Premier, and I know we're speaking in hypotheticals, but given that the the government's in caretaker mode, what happens if something goes wrong?
Well, in terms of the structures that are in place, obviously the State Controller, the Deputy State Controller and Dr Veach in his statutory position will continue to do their role. What we will do is similar to what other states have done, and that is that we'll provide updates, not political updates, but updates to ensure that Tasmanians are kept informed as we work through the next 5 weeks. Should there be a case, then obviously we will rely upon the advice of Dr. Veach and the State Controller and the Deputy State Controller, as we have done throughout this period.
So with
Thank you.
the donations disclosure,
Thanks, guys.
Probably fitting into what we're doing, isn't it?